Kicking on Bookland. I'm here with Craig Robertson to talk about his latest book, but he's going to tell us a little bit about why he changed his name first.
Yeah, well, I said before we kicked off, it's a difficult story. I'm not sure I know the full answers to it. It's partly that I changed publisher before this book, and it was a chance to just do a little bit of a new start. Plus, the book's a bit different, a bit of a new direction. So we went for initials. Took ages to come up with the right initials. It was initially going to be C.R. Robertson, so we found out that had been taken, and about half of the C possible letters had been taken. So eventually we settled on C.S. Robertson, and I just have to remember that's who I am. And when I'm signing books, I keep forgetting, but I'll get used to it eventually.
Yeah. Given that it was because of a change of publisher, that must be a bit weird for you, dealing with having not to use your own name on your book.
Yeah, it's tricky all round because I did 9 books with my previous publisher at Simon Schuster, and it was great. So just simply moving to a new publisher is a bit weird in itself. And then the name change as well, but it feels good. I can most of the time I forget I've changed it, and it's fine. Well, I'm hoping everybody, but people who have read and my previous books didn't all catch on. There was people who'd read the whole book and then realised it was me, which is interesting, I think.
Yeah. It's really interesting to read about the plot line though, because it's not that different to the plots I've read from you before. What is it about you and serial killers that you enjoy writing about so much on that one?
I do find it fascinating. I've done it at least 3 times, maybe 4 out of 10 books. But yeah, I find the psychology of it fascinating, and I've read a lot, and I have an interest there, as I know you have. And just trying to get inside the minds of people who've done that thing and trying to get that psychology right, I think is important as well. So I've done a fair bit of research and talked to people who know a lot more about it than me, and just to try and get that right.
Yeah, I mean, with your previous one before this, Watch Him Die, there was a lot of research into notorious American serial killers. I mean, you must have included most of the big names in that one.
Yeah, I had a go at getting most of them in, yeah, because there's 2 killers in this without giving, I don't think that's giving anything away. I think it says that in the back of the book. And the American killer has a fascination for murderabilia, which is something I've written about before. And he has collected items to do all the big names, all the top guys in serial killing. So there was a lot to include there. And I wanted to seed that throughout the book to try and get an insight into his psychology. So yeah, lots of research on that. But I've done that kind of research a lot over books. But so there was that, but just in getting the psychology of it and getting good information in that was useful as well.
I mean, given that you live in Stirling and that's where Bloody Scotland's based, I mean, that's not normally a location that you would consider that lots of crime happens compared to Glasgow that you chose for your main series, right?
Yeah, well, that's really the reason I said it in Glasgow was, I mean, there's plenty of crime in Stirling as there is in any city, but it's much more low level. We're not famous for having a string of serial killers, touch wood. But yeah, so that's why I didn't, even though I know it well, I lived and worked in Glasgow for a long time too. So it was just a better shout for setting a series. You get away with a bit more there than a relatively small place like this. Certainly, serial killers was never going to work set here.
When writing about Glasgow and having a newspaper protagonist within the series, was it easier with that being part of your background before you became a writer, do you think?
Yeah, I think it was because originally Tony Winter was a police photographer, and I wanted him out of that. I needed to switch and moving him to journalism, where I know a lot more about that than I do about police photography. kind of helped. But also with a journalist, like police detective, he can go places that no one else can. He can go to all sorts of areas. So that was useful for me. And it really was Tony's psyche as well, that he would be that a journalist worked for him. And having a 20-year background in journalism was useful. So I didn't have to do too much research on that front. So that helped because there's always a ton of research to do. So any less is pretty helpful.
And having a partner who's also a crime writer must be a bit of a relief to the kind of stress of dealing with writing. Because with me being on the start of that journey now, I've realised how lonely it is.
Yeah, it can be. It definitely is. But even, I mean, it's really useful having a partner who's a crime writer because she understands, and we understand that there's times when you don't want to talk. You just want to think or you want to write, and so we give each other space to do that. But even having a partner is still it's a solitary existence. We might be in separate rooms doing different things, but it's useful if I want to go and check things out. And because Alex also teaches crime writing as well as writing her own books. She's a great backboard for me to check things on, and she's a great first reader as well. She knows how things should be, so I know if I get it wrong, which I do frequently, then she's there to help me and put things right. So really useful from that point of view.
It must be really useful having a first reader that close, because when you get in the mind of a serial killer or mind of a kind of the protagonist, because your books are very psychological and in the mind of the protagonist, and there's a lot of description and stuff. So having someone there that close to check it must be useful.
It is. I mean, and you don't have to marry the person to have them to be your first checker. So if that's your agent or your editor, then it's still, you need it regardless, because you can be so close to a book that you can't see the wood for the trees. So having a fresh pair of eyes on it and someone who really knows what they're talking about, it's absolutely vital, because I don't think any of us are good enough just to go and write the thing without messing up somewhere along the line or needing a nudge in the right direction. So for me, my first three readers are always Alex, my agent, and my editor. So between them, they can keep me on the right track. So, and yeah, we all need that. We all need that help.
When you were setting up Bloody Scotland, I mean, there's always been a great tradition of Scottish writing, and I grew up reading Ian and Val and most of the big Scottish names, but it took a while before Bloody Scotland became a thing. What was the background to that?
Well, I wasn't there right at the very start. I was there the first year, so I was there for the first festival. So, but groundwork had already been done. Alex Gray and Lynn Anderson had come up with the idea, and then Gordon Brown got involved and did so much to help bring it about and to make it happen. So I was there from so the first festival was 2012, so 10 years ago. This is our 10th anniversary. So I was maybe on board from about January 2012, and I've been involved ever since. And it was a need to just, first of all, to give a platform to Scottish writers, but then increasingly, we're giving a platform to writers all over the UK and over Europe and the world. So it's grown so much in those 10 years. I remember I looked at the first programme from 2012 quite recently, and there was a lot of Scottish writers, maybe 90% were Scottish writers. And this time it's really stretched and grown from there. And we had, I'm guessing, but maybe about 30 writers in the first year. Now will be nearer 80. So it's just grown and grown, and it's grown because people like it and want to come back for more of it. So it's a lot of work to make it happen, but it's rewarding. It's rewarding every September.
Yeah. Who would you say has been the biggest name that you've enjoyed bringing to the festival?
Oh, well, actually, so many, but Lee Child and Jon Nesbo, David Baldacci, and obviously the likes of Ian and Val, Anne Cleese, Mark Billingham, Mike Heron. I guess the biggest one for me is maybe one that we didn't actually have there in person, but last year we had Stephen King there digitally.
Yeah.
And he was on with Linwood Barclay, who was great. And the two of them had an audience in the hall of about, I think it was about 350 people, plus thousands watching online. And that was great and pretty nerve wracking as well, because you know what it's like doing this, how easy it is for something to go wrong digitally. And so, really, till the last second, I arranged for Steve to come over and do it, or to do it online. And I introduced them on stage, and then I interviewed them a bit later. But after I'd introduced them, they went to speak, and there was like no sound coming. And it was only for about 10 seconds, but it was the longest 10 seconds of my life. Because you're like, surely not. You're kidding me that this is going to break down at this point. But someone pressed the right button, and it was fine. And so that was great. He's the ones you think you cannot get and then do get, just felt really good.
With having three locations running
Mm.
at the same time, it must be really complicated to get the logistics right.
It can be. The biggest problem with that is sometimes people have to make choices they don't really want to make. Sometimes there's two events on at the same time and they want to go to both. So that's tricky. We have to make sure everybody knows where they're going. Everybody knows which writer is of which event and which venue. Make sure the writers know the venue. We've got tons of volunteers who help a lot. And we've done it for 10 years now. So hopefully there'll still be things that will trip us up, but hopefully not as many as there used to be.
I was talking to Lynn the other week about some of the early events at the festival, and those cocktails involved, I think.
Yeah, we did it was a crazy event. It got changed right to the last minute. We were going to do there was a publication called the Killer Cookbook way back in, I think would either be 2012 or 2013, in which authors all gave recipes. The money was to raise money for a new morgue in Dundee University, and we were all going to cook the things that we put in the program in the book. Although mine would have proved difficult because mine was for a recipe for black pudding made with human blood. So it was going to be a bit tricksy as to whether they were going to allow us to do that or not. But then it turned out they wouldn't let us do any cooking. So we made cocktails instead, and it was just complete chaos. But we had a whole bunch of authors. We all hammed it up. The audience all got tons of free booze and cocktails, and we got away with it just about, I think. So yeah, it was fun, those early days.
Why black pudding, and why?
It's my favorite food. It's my favorite thing, and so I thought it was the obvious thing to do a recipe for, and then human blood was just a little extra, a little crime writing Prejean thrown in there on top of that. But maybe for the best that we didn't do it. You can make black pudding with human blood, but it's probably not recommended. Most people wouldn't want it.
Yeah. When you went on tour judging for a black pudding, that must be really interesting, because I know Stuart McBride has won awards for his stovies. So.
He did. Stuart was a world stovey making champion. Yeah, I was talking to him about this just last week. So he's resting on his laurels. He's not going to have another go. He's won it now, so he's not going to try again.
Yeah. So what would you say is the strangest plot point that you've come up with or you discussed with your mates?
Oh,
I always find that really interesting.
Yeah, well, I remember from my first book, Random, the whole point of it around it was that the serial killer was killing people at random. He had a purpose that we discovered later, but he was choosing people at random. And for the plot, I wanted each killing to be very inventive, something, if not unique, then unusual at least. And I remember sitting in a restaurant in Barcelona with my brother and two nephews who had only been in their teens at the time. And we were discussing ways. They were keen to come up with ways of how to kill people. And we were probably just a bit too loud, and we're getting some really, really funny looks from that as we were discussing it. But it's I think I had 6 or 7 killings, and they all had to be a bit more out there than the last one. So amongst that lot, if I remember, the second one, someone had their mouth sealed shut with duct tape, and then their nostrils glued together so that they asphyxiated very slowly. And another victim was killed with nicotine poisoning, liquid nicotine, which does horrible, horrible things to your inside and will kill you within about 30 seconds flat, and all your internal organs just basically collapse. And it's all rather messy. So maybe those. I'd go for some of those.
I mean, when you look at Grace McGill in comparison, that's rather sedate. I mean,
yeah, I agree. But either the Times or the Sunday Times called the book called the Grace McGill gut wrenching, and I found it really interesting because there's no killings on the level of random, but what you do see is the aftermath. So for those who don't know, Grace is a cleaner, and she cleans up after bodies have lain undiscovered and have lain for a long time. So she cleans up the mess that's left, as well as the emotional mess of people. So I think when people don't like the idea of dealing with, what happens to bodies after they die, it's a very natural thing, but most of us don't like to think about it. So I think that's what the Times called gut wrenching. But you're right. In comparison, the killings themselves aren't like that at all.
What was the idea behind that? Because although I've seen it on like CSI and stuff, it's not really been in like a lot of crime fiction before.
No, and that's part of the reason I wanted to do it. So I read a magazine article about a young woman in Japan who does this for a living. She does it full time. In Japan, it's a bit of a phenomenon of older people dying alone and their bodies not being discovered. Over there, they call it kodakushi, which literally means lonely deaths. And this young woman goes in and cleans up after people have died alone. And immediately, I knew I wanted to write about this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Because I wanted to know what it said about our society, that we would leave people alone. And it meant I could write a bit about loneliness, and it was different. And I knew immediately I wanted to write a little bit about this woman, but change her to make her Scottish and make her the person I needed her to be in the book.
What would you say makes it quintessential Scottish character over in, say, an American? Because I've read your characterization of both countries now, and I'm just curious.
Yeah, well, generally, people are people. I don't think people are that different across the world, but they have things that are different about them. If you're brought up in Glasgow, you're going to be a little bit different, even if you're brought up in Edinburgh, even though it's only 40 miles away, because you're shaped by the city and the people around you. And Scottish people are a little bit different. We can be a bit more reserved in one way and be more in your face in another. We tend to be a bit quieter, not shout about things. We have slightly different quirks, but of course it's generalizing. But I wanted to use some of that for Grace and make her a shy person in a city where people talk to you, and she doesn't like that much. So there was bits I wanted to use.
Yeah, shy people make really interesting characters. I mean, because they're very insular, and then their internal voices are complicated. So when getting involved in an internal voice like Grace's, is it any different to your other characters, would you say?
Yeah, I think it is. And for exactly the reasons you said, that's why I ended up doing it first person, because I wanted to be right inside Gracie's head and I wanted to take the reader right inside Gracie's head because she's a shy person. So if we did it third person and all you would hear is what she was saying rather than thinking, we wouldn't have got to know her the same way. I started writing the book in the third person. I'd written maybe 15 or 20,000 words, and it wasn't quite working. And I thought that I knew that I needed to go back and write first person. And immediately Grace became Grace. She became more alive to me. I had a bit more sense of who she was and why she was thinking. And it became so much easier to to put her fully across. So it worked, and I think you had to be really with her the whole way for this book.
Would you say that you were influenced by any other writers when you were doing that, or because I'm trying to think of the unique internal voices from other writers, and I can't particularly.
I don't think
anything
so.
else.
I don't think so. I think we're all influenced a little bit by everybody we read, and it all leaves a little dent. But I don't think there was any one person or any one book that I followed on this. I tried to do my own thing, but yeah, there's always a chance that there's little bits tag on from somewhere down the line. But yeah, I had to find her voice myself, I think.
Is it any more complicated than writing the opposite gender? Because I've always struggled with that when I'm trying to do that myself.
A little. I wouldn't have attempted this on book one. In fact, originally in book one, Random was going to be written from the point of view of Rachel Neri, the detective. And I kind of chickened out of that a bit, doing a whole book from the woman's point of view. But I've kind of learned my stuff, I hope, a bit more. And I really wasn't, I was wary. I was always aware of that's what I was doing and that I shouldn't be complacent about getting it right. But I was okay with doing it this time. Actually, a bigger complication is that, that's my phone, I'll turn it off, is that Grace is 35. That was, for me, slightly more difficult than writing her as a woman, because there's differences in languages and in things that you're aware of and cultural references. So I had to make sure she didn't sound like she was my age rather than 35. And so that was trickier than writing her as a woman. But in both cases, I had made sure I had people check it for me. Am I getting this right? Tell me where I'm going wrong. So you need that kind of fact checking.
So has your writing style changed since 2010? Because 2010 is not that long ago, really, is it?
I don't know. It kind of feels that long ago. It feels like a long time ago now. Yeah, I think it has. But because of this being first person, I went a bit back more to the style that I used for Random because it was first person. And there's little tricks you can use in first person that you just can't use. And I find first person, it's more fun. It's more fun to write because you can take the reader right down that rabbit hole inside somebody's head and take them with you all the way. In between, yeah, I'm probably more descriptive than I used to be. But I tried to pare that back a wee bit in this book as well. But I think your style gets a little more polished, probably. You learn how to do it. And if you don't learn a bit more after 10 books, then you're probably doing something wrong. You should learn a wee bit what works for you and what doesn't work for you. So I think yes.
Would you say that the first person is less descriptive? Because I think it really works on the audiobook.
Yeah, the narrator in the audiobook is fantastic. I think she did an amazing job. She's Lauren Lyle, who is in Outlander, so some people might well know her from there. And she's also going to be, she's going to play Karen Perry in Val's adaptation of Val's series, which is out, I think, later this year or early next year. So they sent me a demo tape from Lauren, and immediately I was like, yeah, I want her. Just let's do that. And she just got it. She has that kind of quirky edge that really works, and edginess that works for Grace. So she was fantastic at that. So all the credit for that coming alive is on her rather than on me, but it does work.
Yeah. So had you seen her in Outlander before she did the book?
No, I've never watched it. I've never watched Outlander. So when they sent me it, they were like, she's in Outlander. Do you want to listen to her? And they sent me a demo of her doing something else. And as soon as I heard it, I was in. I was like, yep, we don't need to see anyone else. She's going to do.
The covers changed as well. Because when I first read it back soon after it was published, it was blue with a different background altogether. So why did you change to the yellow one you've got now?
The publisher's decision. I mean, I okayed it on both cases. So the original one was, it was kind of blue. It was a woman's face behind a window, kind of blurred, so you could see Grace, but not quite. And that it worked. It gave it some mystery, but I really like the new one, which I hope people can see it on screen right now. So it's yellow, which is kind of unusual for me because it looks like a bright, happy book, which it's not really. But the clues I guess are in deaths. So you know, and my name's there. You know, it's a crime book. The daisies are kind of key to the plot, but they're faded, dead daisies, and I love it. It kind of jumps off the cover, and I really like it in preference. So we went through a few different ideas. For anyone who's read the book, Grace, as well as Cleaning, makes dioramas, so little scale models of the places she cleans and where bodies have been found. And so we looked at using one of those, and it looked really creepy. So that was a possibility. But you just go through different choices and covers and come up with the one that works. And I really like this. I'm really glad we've done it.
Yeah. After I read the book, I'm a really big fan of Steve Carell. Have you seen Dinner for Schmucks?
I'm not. No.
Well, he gets dead rats off the road and makes dioramas from dead rats. So I just thought, yeah, just really. Is there any kind of books that you've read and then you've thought, oh, I like that kind of style, and then you've seen it in a film or so?
Yeah, well, I guess we do it often, and what the key trick is not to copy these things. It's so difficult. That's why I tend not to read when I'm writing a book, because either you read something. The worst thing is to read something that's really good. That's just really annoying when you're writing, or you get a bit of a voice in your head. So I try to avoid all those things. But seeing things done really well, and movies can take you places. The books can't, but books can take you many more places than a movie can. They can mess with your head much better than a movie, I think, and just filling your head and letting you make up your own nightmares to go with them, I think, is what we can do.
Yeah. What would you say is the optimum length that you enjoy writing a book on? Because
I keep trying to get a little bit shorter, not write quite so much, and that's definitely what I'm trying with the one I'm on. I think Grace comes in about 95,000 words, maybe something like that. So about 350 pages. I don't want to write much more than that. It's each to their own, and I'd never knock anyone who writes longer books, but books coming in at 500 plus, I know I wouldn't really want to read a book once it hits 600 or so. So I think 350, 300, 350 is probably enough for me. I think the most I've written would have been about 125,000 maybe.
Yeah. Would you say that? Yeah.
But each book's got a natural length to it, I think. That you tell the story that's got to be told. And sometimes it's less and sometimes it's more. Also, you also have contracts that kind of dictate length a little bit as well. So you've got to be mindful of those.
What would you say? Do you think that's the perfect length is around 90,000? Because I'm with my book, it's a little bit different because it's not crime fiction per se. So I'm struggling to kind of work out where the word count's going to fall.
I wouldn't worry about it too much. I think the key thing is write the book and tell the story, because you can deliberately make it short and leave out bits that need to be in there. And also if you pad it out, people are going to see that right away. Yeah. So it's got a natural length. So what genre is it if it's not crime?
Well, it's a biography as well as like interviews with authors. So I'm finding it really difficult to kind of shape where the narrative's going to go. And with being only a few weeks away from editing, it's a bit of a strange one.
I wouldn't worry about it. I wouldn't worry about it too much, because at the end of the day, a publisher will tell you something different anyway. They'll tell you, no, we'd like more, or no, we need a bit less to lose one. So yeah, just do it, and let them worry about it after it.
Yeah, when you're looking at I know that Lynn does like the pitch perfect thing, but if you were to do like a 3-minute pitch, for one of your books, which ones would you choose and why?
Ah, goodness. Yeah, 3 minute pitch is really tricky. I think I could, sometimes it's easier to do the 30-second elevator pitch and just cram it all in there. Pitching's a completely different art from writing a book, which is why I think these pitch perfect things or their equivalent are great and they give people a really good chance. But some people are really good at writing a book and pretty shit at doing a pitch. And some people can be the other way around. So at the end of the day, it's all well, my goodness, a pitch. Okay. I remember the pitch for Watch Him Die. It's not going to be 3 minutes. It'll be like 30 seconds. So in Watch Him Die, it's half set in Glasgow and half set in Los Angeles. There's a body found in LA and a killer on the loose in Glasgow. There's a young man, the last victim of the LA killer, is slowly dying, and the only person that can help the police is the killer, and he will only help them if he can watch him die. So it's all based around the technology of this prisoner, the killer in Glasgow. If he gets a look in, if he gets to see this guy dying, then he'll help the cops out, and he's their only lead.
It's very sinister.
Oh yeah,
that idea, and given that we're live online at the moment, what was the influence for that? Because I know that there's been similar plots on the TV again before, but first time I read it in book form.
Well, the beginning of that book came from the Johnny Cash song, Folsom Prison Blues, where he shot a man and him die. So that line kind of resonated with me, and I wondered, okay, let's say that was the title of a book, where would I go with it? And it all kind of sprang from there. That and the idea of technology. It was also a bit of, it's like a digital version of Strangers on a Train. Remember that Hitchcock movie where they agree to swap killings? And I thought, well, what if people these days wouldn't have to meet to do that? They could meet online, and they could swap. And I made it difficult for myself. So I thought, yeah, exactly half of it will be in Glasgow and half of it will be in Los Angeles. There's an 8-hour time difference, which really made it tricky at times. But I wanted to see if I could do that and pull it off. Because I didn't think that had quite been done. And I wanted to have a go at it. And there was times during the book trying to write it that I regretted it. But, you get there in the end.
Yeah, I really did like the dual timeline kind of thing, especially with the US voices. We were talking about the audiobook earlier. Were you ever tempted to ask them to do an American narrator and a Scottish one?
Yes, yeah, because it was tricky because there is only one, and she did a great job, but it meant she did American accents for the American parts, and yeah, it's Trixie. Yeah, it's I've forgotten her name, but she was great. But she was something to do male American voices, and it's a stretch, but she did a good job at it. I guess if you did 2 narrators, you got to pay 2 narrators, so that might have been part of their thinking.
Yeah, I must admit I do like multiple narrators. I know you couldn't have done that with Grace, but who would you say you've enjoyed with that approach? Because you have to read loads of writers for festivals, so there must be someone that with that approach you've enjoyed reading.
Someone who would have done it with 2 narrators? Yeah, it definitely could have been done. I didn't want it to. I wanted to stick with Grace because I felt that if you have one narrator and it's first person, then all you know is what she knows. All you know is what's going on inside her head. And you have to take that at face value. You can't know what else is going on unless you can cheat a little. You can cheat and have her read newspapers or watch television, so she will hear things or see things. But I like that single track. It's easier to mislead readers, and I want them on the side of one person and knowing all that. But this time I'm doing a dual narration on the one I'm writing at the moment, and that's tricky in its own way, but I'm enjoying it at the moment.
I must admit, I do like the way you have one chapter from one and then one chapter from the other. I won't kind of ask you what we're doing whether you're doing that live. I mean, you can tell me that afterwards, but
I'll tell you after.
yeah, I just think that idea is a really intriguing one, because it can, as you say, you can hide a lot of things from the reader. What would you say you enjoy about the fact about hiding things from the reader? Would you say?
Well, that's part of a job, but that's absolutely a key part of it. And it's because you have to surprise the reader at some point. If the reader knows what's going to happen every stage of the way, there's no tension. There's no surprise. There's no need to keep on going and find out what's going to happen. So you have to surprise them. You have to hide things. But what you cannot do is cheat them. You cannot cheat them. So you can't just pull something out of nowhere and just like Scooby Doo and pull off somebody's mask. Things have to. You have to be able to support the things that you do and hiding things. Because if a reader comes away feeling that you've just lied to me the whole way, or you can kind of do that as long as you can justify it. So it's tricky, but you have to want them to want more, and you have to give them some satisfaction out of that as well. So that's a large part of what we do. But I've written books, at least 2, where I tell them right from the beginning who the killer is. So I'm not trying to hide that, but then I'm maybe hiding their motivations or hiding what's going to happen to them, so that you can do it in lots of different ways.
What is it about the criminal mind that you like to write about so much? Because if you tell the reader, yeah,
I think I love the crime novel. It's always what I read more than anything else was crime novels, and I love the way that it can talk about society, but keep it really interesting as well. You can do both those things. You can get into people's heads. You can look at why they do things. And for me, the whodunit is not always as interesting as why they did it. Try and get inside people's motivations. What makes them tick. So for me, crime works for that more than anything else. So it's where I'm going. And yeah, I don't really think I want to go somewhere else. I don't see myself. I'm not going to be writing sci-fi or horror or romance. That's not going to happen. I like the dark side of stuff.
With the history of Stirling, were you ever tempted to do it like a historical crime? Because
I've looked at it, and I've had vague ideas of doing that, but I never really felt I had the right idea to do it. I admire those that do, and there's a ton of research, and there's people who are doing it really well at the moment. Um, Anna Mazzola and Laura Shepherd Robinson and Ambrose Parry and Douglas Skelton, and there's so many others. S.J. Paris are writing great books historically and historical settings, and it's working for them. So I think I'll just leave that to them for the moment. But never say never. You're right. Stirling's full of history. It's a really historical city, and on our doorstep. So I never say never, but I've not had the right idea yet.
Because I was reading about your background in Stirling for the interview, and I just thought that because you grew up in Stirling, there's a lot of background that you could talk about Stirling that other writers couldn't do because they don't have to grow up where they write.
Yeah, I mean, the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314, I literally went to school on the battlefield. So and I can see the castle, Stirling Castle, from my house. Battle of Stirling Bridge was literally at the end of the street. So I'm surrounded by it. And if you live here, you do know all that stuff. And there were some terrible, terrible tales of dark deeds that happened here over the years. So I do know a lot of it. So yeah, I might put that to good use someday, but not yet. Not yet.
Yeah, because of course Robbie Morrison won the debut prize last year, and of course that was very dark. But yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah. See, I still think it's a bit of a cheat calling that history. I grew up through that decade. I don't want to be history just yet, but yeah, I mean that was a terrific book, and that used that sense of place and atmosphere of the time really well. So he did a great job with that book.
Yeah, this year's McIlvenney Davy Prize is very different in its nominees, I think.
Yeah, it is, and it's going to be really interesting to see where that goes. So there's 5 of them, including Frankie Boyle, which is really interesting to see to what extent. Thankfully, I've judged the debut prize before, but I'm really glad I'm not doing it this year, because you'd have to read Meantime, the Frankie Boyle book, and kind of ignore who he is and just take it at face value. Tariq Ashkenadi's Welcome to Cooper must have a chat. There's some really terrific books on the list. So I find it tricky the year I did it. So Claire Askew won for All the Hidden Truths the year I judged it. And that wasn't easy to do. And it's a big responsibility, especially when it's someone's first book and you're making a huge difference potentially to their career.
Yeah.
So I'm glad someone else is doing it this time round.
Yeah, of course, Claire Askew's up for the big one this year, isn't she, with the 4th book in the series?
Yes, and we kind of like that in that sort of graduation thing of people coming in, because we run Pitch Perfect, we have spotlights, we try to do as much as we can for debuts and to give people a voice and a platform, to give diversity of writers a platform as well. So when they go up through the ranks and go from debut to up for the big prize, that's great. We feel we're kind of doing our job a bit.
Yeah, her plots are very different to the norm, aren't they? What would you say was the reason that you went for All the Hidden Truths the year she won?
It was really tricky because there was about 3 books. There was really not much in it. And if I remember, I don't want to give away too many secrets, so probably not supposed to talk about judging room thing. We maybe, from memory, it wasn't unanimous. I think 3 of us wanted 3 different books, so then we had to talk it over and do a lot of things. But the quality of writing was terrific. The description of prose was really good, but so were the other books that year as well. So it was a tough one. But that's the way you want it. You want as many good books as possible being up for the prize, and you want it to be tough for judges.
I must admit, I haven't found it easy judging the theses when I've done it. Yeah, it's not.
Well, no, should it be? If it's
easy
easy, if there's only one good book amongst, was it 18 or 20 normally for the long list of the theses? If there's only one obviously good book, then something's wrong. There should be really tough. There should be at least 10 of those would make good winners. Yeah. And there's so many good books around that's the way of it. Did you, without giving too much away, did you agree with the final winner?
Oh yeah, I mean, Mick Herron, he'd been nominated. I think that was his 5th nomination that year. That he made the top 6 for. So, even if he didn't win it this year, which he did.
Which he did, yeah. His picks are okay. They're all right.
Yeah. What would you say is important about the comedy? Because that was all over Mick's books, and there's a fair bit of comedy in your own.
Yeah, I'd like to do it, and I think because it's a Scottish book, we tend to do that kind of thing. We like a lot of black humour, and particularly in Glasgow, there's no jokes in Edinburgh. So if my book was in Edinburgh, there'd be no jokes in it because they're just not funny. But Glaswegians tend to be funnier, and also I think you need to break the tension at points. You need to let your reader breathe a little bit, because if it's just full on darkness, it's hard going. So you need a little bit of joke here and there to let them breathe. And in my background as a journalist, and it's the same for people who are in the police or the fire engine or the health service, you make these kind of jokes because it's a way of getting through it. It's whistling through the graveyard. It can be really tough. So you need to break it up with something. And humor's usually the way to go. So there's always hopefully a joke or two. Not as many as in Mix, but enough to keep it going.
What is it about graveyards that you like? Because I read in the research that they said you got a thing for graveyards.
I do. I find them fascinating. There's one at the castle up near me, which I will wander through every now and again. And, there's graves there, from the 1600s, and you get an insight into life there. And it's a stunning sight. If anybody comes to Stirling, go up to the graveyard near the castle. You can see for about, I'd say for about 40 miles on a decent day. Castle's right there. You get an insight into how people treated death. And I find it fascinating. It's a real glimpse into history. And also just that dark side, but it kind of works for my warped, sick mind as well.
Yeah, I must admit, it was really intriguing talking about that with Neil Lancaster last week, because of course the Graveyard opens his first book.
Yeah. Yeah, I can you can see why people are drawn to it. You know, there's the one up there certainly is a really beautiful thing, and I love beautiful old graveyards. There's something kind of haunted about them. Obviously, it plays tricks in your mind, but it gives us as writers tons of scope. I mean, I used the Necropolis in Glasgow, which if anybody knows about, is this amazing Victorian cemetery just sprawling over acres, and with statues and graves in there. Yeah, go in there at night if you can get past the drug addicts and have a look around. It's a great place.
With over the last few years, you've hosted the last event on Scotland Online with you've done highlights of the pub event.
Oh yeah, yeah.
What would you say is your favourite or funniest event in that pub? Because it's only a small place.
So that's it's Crime of the Coup, which happens in the Coup, which is my local, and so every Saturday night during Bloody Scotland, they give us the pub. Mandy, the landlady, gives us the pub for the whole of Saturday night, and we get authors in, and some of them will sing, some of them will do poetry. We've had a bit of stand up, all sorts of things. We've had readings in Icelandic, but a lot of music, and it's great because a lot of the guys have a lot of talent. So it's been fun. Oh, if I had to pick a favorite, I would probably sticking on safe ground with my missus. The first year, the Slice Girls did uh, what's it called? Cell Block Tango from Chicago, where they've all killed their ex-husbands, and he's got it coming. So they all got dressed up and burlesque. They all sat on the bar and they were surrounded by people. Remember, Ian Rankin was standing right in front of them, wondering what else going on. And they absolutely blew the roof off the place. It was great. And everybody just absolutely loved it. So that would be a highlight. Oscar de Murillo, who's I'm sure you know, author from Mexico, he played violin while Mark Billingham and Stuart Neville did The Devil Goes Down to Georgia by the Charlie Daniels Band. And Oscar does the violin bit for playing the devil. That was fantastic. We've had just a lot of really good nights in there and a lot of fun. And sometimes it's not gone right, but that's fine. Abu Mukherjee closed us one night with his father's version of "And I Love You So" by Perry Como, which I kind of made him do at the last moment, and which was a bit mean, but everybody loved it. It was just great fun.
What's it like during your local when the festival's not on? Because you must get on really well with the landlady.
Yeah, thankfully, yeah, she gives us a lot of scope to do that. It's never as quiet, so it's a really traditional old Scottish pub, and it's not that big. But certainly the first year we did Crime of the Coup, there was like 125 people in it, completely rammed. Nobody could move, and we won't do that quite this year because of post COVID. No one quite wants that kind of crush. So it's a lot quieter the rest of the year, but she loves it. Yeah, she loves it. It's one of our favorite nights of the year. Ian Rankin, without giving too much away, will always pop in before Crime of the Coup and have a pint and a whiskey on Monday. And a lot of the authors will go in. A lot of even the ones who are not performing will go in and watch, and it's just everybody together, and it's a good fun night.
If you were to write a scene in a bar like at the Coup, because I know Ian writes about his local
the Oxford,
yeah. What would you say is the advantage of writing a scene from a bar, to say? Because I find that really interesting.
I think one of the things, it's atmosphere. And one of the things I'm finding a little tricky with the thing I'm working on is it's set in a fictional village. So it's a fictional pub. So it's more difficult for me to get that sense of atmosphere somewhere that doesn't exist. So I may take the Coup and just kind of move it into this fictional village. Mm-hmm. So I mean, I know where the cellar is. I know where I could put a body. I know those little places I could work with. But it's a whiskey bar, and she's got dozens, if not hundreds, of whiskies, and it really has an atmosphere about the place. So I would know the things I've got to work with, and you know the people that go in there. You can describe them or the kind of people that go in, and you can bring that to life. So I prefer using real places, and because
Yeah,
it's easier to get that color from them, and people like places they know as well.
because bars do have a big influence, like because they're big in the McIlvenny books as well, aren't they?
Yeah, yeah, they are. I went to use one. I was writing a scene in, oh, I can't remember which book now, but I wanted to take the bar that there was a similarity into one scene, and unintentionally, but when I realized I was doing a similarity to a scene that Willie had used in Laidlaw, I thought what I'll do is I'll take the pub that Willie used, so it'll be obvious. So I'm not trying to hide the fact that this is quite similar. But then the pub that Willie used in Laidlaw was called the Gay Laddie, and I didn't think that was really going to work this time around. So I changed it and called it the Laidlaw as a bit of homage to Willie McIlvany.
Yeah,
But yeah, the reason that he uses it and I do is that, Glasgow's a drinking city, and a lot of it revolves around the pubs. And, crime writing's a thirsty business as well. So we spend time in there, and you can see people at their best and at their worst, and it's a real reflection of the city. So I like to use them, and yeah, I've set loads of scenes in pubs. I think.
when you were coming up with the idea for using the McIlvenny, uh, using Lee as the McIlvenny Prize, the name for behind it. Why was it the Mac? Why was it then?
It seemed the obvious thing. So Willie had come back to Bloody Scotland. He sort of emerged from the mist a little because he'd been quiet for years, and he came back to Bloody Scotland when they were relaunching the books, and he loved it, and he loved the fact that I think he was surprised how well remembered he was. He thought maybe he'd been forgotten, which was never the case. But he loved it there, and he became, a fixture of Bloody Scotland in those first few years. And then when Willie died, it seemed a really obvious thing to do. The prize was already gaining some status by that point, and it was a really easy one. We had discussion in the board meeting. And a couple of us argue about whose idea it was or who said it first. But I think quite a few of us had the idea. It was a no-brainer, really. He hated the phrase, but he was known as the godfather of Tartan Noir. So to name the main Scottish crime writing prize after him, it seemed the right thing to do. And I'm really glad we did it. It works.
Yeah, and I mentioned that, and somebody might notice that I slipped up there when I was talking about it initially because he's actually on next week. Yeah, I'm talking to him about his second book.
Liam.
Yeah, Liam's doing next week's slot. So
very good, very good. I'm going to see Liam in a week. I'm going to New Zealand for 2 months, so
yeah,
I'm going to be seeing Liam over the fight. I'm doing an event with him and Val, which will be shown at Bloody Scotland. We're going to record it in New Zealand in front of a live audience there, and then show it at Bloody Scotland to kind of tie things up a little bit. But yeah, you'll have great fun with Liam.
I must admit, I did love The Quaker, and I'm really looking forward to reading the next book the coming week. As you're going over to New Zealand this time, what is it that you're looking forward to about New Zealand that Liam would have probably told you about?
Well, we're going there on a writing fellowship. Alex and I are both going. So we'll go and we'll get a bit of retreat and get some work done, do some writing. But, obviously I want to go and see the country. It's an amazing place. So I want to get up to Queenstown. I want to go to Rotorua. The place we're living at has an albatross colony just a walk away. So it's going to be great fun. Like it's going to be a little bit cold when we go over it first in September. And then it'll heat up a little bit, but I'm loving it. I want to go and explore the country. I've been doing some teaching at the University of Otago, and I'll be doing some events with other crime writers, and I'll be meeting different people. But yeah, seeing New Zealand and seeing places that I've been before. I've been for a day. I went for 1 day to Auckland, so I'll get a bit of a better sense of New Zealand this time around, I think. So really looking forward to going.
Teaching a foreign country must be really interesting.
It will be. I'm not quite sure what to expect. Alex has done a fair bit more teaching than I have, but they have a Scottish crime writing module as part of the Scottish and Irish studies there. And so I will be teaching wannabe crime writers and people who want to know more about it. So I will, whatever little wisdom I've got, I'll be happy to share it and pass on. But yeah, it should be fascinating. And I think we're going to be mentoring some students as well. So that will be good. I'm really looking forward to that.
I must admit, teaching crime writing must be really cool, because I'm thinking about doing that in the near future, doing an MA. So yeah.
I think so. I think it will be for me, and I think for a lot of writers, we know how to do it, but how to teach it is different, because we don't necessarily break down the mechanics of how we do it. We know what to do to make it work, but if you say, well, what is it you do, and how do you do it, and why do you do what you do? So I'm going to have to sit down and work some of that out, and it'll probably be a useful exercise for me as well to work that out.
Well, I'll let you enjoy the rest of your evening. So thank you very much for such a really interesting hour, and enjoy yourself in New Zealand.
Alex, thank you very much. I enjoyed it. That was fun.
No problem at all. Really enjoyed it. Yeah. Well, bye everybody. See you all next week at 7.